Hey, what's up everyone? Today I'm going to show you how I made these ambient lights for my Miata, but this guide will apply to just about any car. I'm making this guide as there's pretty much no videos on a full DIY ambient light system, and it's usually just people installing pre-made kits. I'll try to make this video as easy as possible so anyone can make it, even if you don't know much about wiring. Before I start on the video, I'm going to touch on one of the kits. I actually bought the Symphony kit off AliExpress, and the quality of the lights is actually pretty good. However, the app barely works, and after I connected the lights once, they just stopped working altogether. And looking on the App Store, it looks like I'm not the only one with this issue. Anyway, let's just get right into making the lights from scratch. Firstly, I'll go over all the parts and the rough cost breakdown. Before I get started, I just want to say that I don't know that much about electronics, but this is just what worked for me. So if you know any parts that might work better, please let me know down below in the comments, and maybe you can help someone else out. So I'll leave the links to all the parts in the description below. I'm just going to touch on the acrylic cover. I couldn't find any alternatives for this, and there's only one seller for it, so it's pretty expensive. Hopefully you guys can find something similar that's cheaper. I actually did try one of the other acrylic covers, and I'll put a picture up on the screen, but as you can see, it didn't diffuse the light very well, and you could just see the LEDs poking through. So these are definitely the best ones that I've seen. However, they are pretty expensive. And also about the ESP32, that's what will run WLED, and you can get any of the ESP32s. I think they should all work, except I did try the C6 and that didn't work. In this tutorial, I'll be using the C3, so if you want to follow along, I would get that one. And also with some of these parts, like the buck converter, the ESP32, and the logic level shifter, I'd probably get 2 or 3 of them, just in case you fry one of them, because shipping does take quite a while. Alright guys, with the parts out of the way, let's just get right into it. First, I'll show you how to flash WLED onto your ESP32. And in this tutorial, I'll be showing the steps for the ESP32 C3. But it's pretty much the same for all of them. If you're using the C3 like I am, you might have an issue where it keeps disconnecting and reconnecting, and if so, you just want to hold down the boot button while plugging it in. Once you've plugged it in, you just want to go to install.wled.me. I'll have it linked in the description below, but you just want to go here, and you can select the beta if you want, but I'd probably just go with the release, and then hit install, select the ESP32, and then just press connect. Then you go install WLED. Now for the C3, it will be slightly different. It will be on a different site, but after this point it will be pretty much the same. For this tutorial, you want to go to this site. You want to select, for me this first one didn't work, but this one did. Then you select here, agree, install, select it. You'll select install WLED, and then while holding the boot button, you'll click install. Once erasing shows up, you can let go, and then you just wait for it to finish installing. Okay, after the installation is complete, you can just hit next, and you want to press the reset button on the ESP32. It's just the button next to boot. You'll hear it disconnect and then reconnect. You can just refresh the page, go back to the same installer, and then press agree, connect, and now this time this should show up, and you just do connect to Wi-Fi, enter in your network and password, hit connect. Then now that it's connected, you can visit the device, and at this point you want to go to config, Wi-Fi setup, and just for now you can change the name that you'll connect to it with. So for this I'll just do test, and also you want to name this. This is what you'll connect to it with when you put it in the car, so you can just name it like something like that, and then you want to change the password as well. but for testing I'll just leave it empty. Also make sure that you enable this option so the access point is always open. Great, and then you want to go back in config, LED preferences, change this to 12 volt because we'll be using 12 volt, and then that stays the same, this is the same, and you can change this to RGB. Here's a wiring diagram that we'll be using, but it's okay if you don't remember it and you can just follow along with the video. Okay, so firstly we'll solder in the pins to the ESP32 and the level shifter. Now in this circuit, red will be for positive and white will be for negative. So to begin with, just take two short red wires and splice them together, and then we'll just solder them together at the end. And that will go into our power adapter that will plug into the 12 volt power. And we'll just do the same thing for two white wires. Next we'll solder one of the red wires into the in plus on the buck converter and the white into the in minus. Next we'll plug in the 12 volt power adapter, and on the other end it should read around 12 volts, or it could be anything really if it's been adjusted, but you just want a voltage on the other side. Next, while reading the voltage, you will turn the knob on the top of the buck converter counterclockwise until it reaches 5 volt. And I'll just put a piece of tape on top just so it doesn't get turned accidentally. After that, on the outside, you also do two wires for positive and negative on both sides. Firstly, we'll solder one of the white wires from the buck converter out onto ground on the ESP32. Next, you'll make an opening in the wire that you just soldered and splice in an extra white wire. Then you can take one of the red wires coming out of the buck converter and solder it onto 5 volt on the ESP32. Next we'll switch over to the level shifter and solder in the other red wire from the buck converter into the high voltage side. Then you'll solder in the last white wire from the buck converter into the ground next to high voltage. Then you'll take the white wire that you spliced in from the ground on the ESP32 and you'll solder it into the low voltage ground on the level shifter. Then you'll get a new wire, I just use green, but you can use whatever color you want, and then solder that onto 3.3 volt on the ESP32, and that connects to the low voltage in on the level shifter. Now you want to solder two more green wires onto the output pins from the ESP32. In my case I use 1 and 2, but I think you can use any of them if you want. And those get soldered onto low voltage 1 and low voltage 2. Finally, you just need to turn it around and add two more green wires to high voltage 1 and high voltage 2. And these will be the wires that connect to your LED strips for data. Lastly, you can plug it in, and if you navigate to the domain you set, you should be able to connect. If not, I will double check your wiring, but that's about it for this. Okay, so let's get into making the LED strips. First you want to put some solder on the pads, and then you will just attach the wires. Now in this video I won't be covering how to crimp the wires onto the JST connector, and I'd recommend doing that, but I won't be covering how to do it in this video because there's already quite a few other videos on YouTube about that. Next, I already have the wires set up from the ESP32, so I just plug the connector in to see if the LEDs are working properly. Next, we're going to put the LED strips in the channels, and you can see there's a channel, so the LEDs only go in one way. So we'll just put that in and cut it to size. Then we'll put the reflective tape over it, leaving a bit of a gap at the edge for light. And yeah, here's me just testing it to see if it works properly, and it does. Now here's the wiring loom that I made for my car. In this diagram, red is the wiring loom and the white are the LED strips. Now you can see that the wiring loom only goes to the first of the LED strips in the middle, and they're connected to each other from the end of the last strip. And I just did that using the female and the male JST connector. You'll probably want to make a diagram like this for your own car just so you can figure out how big you want the wiring loom to be. I'll just elaborate a bit more on the wiring loom because I feel like I didn't explain enough. But pretty much it's just some long runs of wire. Basically I just have maybe 3-meter long wire, just the red and the white for power. And then I'll just strip the wire without cutting in half and wire in some of the parts that come off the side. So you can see, like for example, I would just strip the wire and then wire in the footwell left and then all the other parts. And I wanted to control both of the footwells together, so I have the data of those connected together. And then I wanted all the stuff in the dash and the transmission tunnel to be the same as well, so I wired those together. And then yeah, pretty much after you do all that, at the end of each of those you'll want to put a female JST connector so that you can just plug in the male ones from the LED strips. And this is the final circuit. You can see that I've replaced the 12-volt power that we use for testing with a fuse tap, and then the negative will go to the ground in the car. Usually there's a bolt connected to the chassis and you can just add a ring terminal connector. Alright, and here's everything connected up. You just want to make sure it all works before you put it in the car. You can see I've taken all the trim out of my car, but for your car it might be different. You might not need to do that, and you might just be able to push all the LEDs into place. And finally, you just want to do one last test. Just plug it into the fuse box and make sure everything works. I think in my case I just connected to the auxiliary power, and I'm just using a 1 amp fuse on that. At this point I'll just route the cable loom through. Then I'll add in all the strips and connect them up, make sure they work. And yeah, that's it. You should be done with it now after you put all the trim back. And here you can see the final product. Now to connect to the lights, you just open up the Wi-Fi. You'll see the access point and you'll be able to connect. It'll ask you to sign in, and then it will open up the GUI. And you can just go through all the patterns, or you can make your own. And yeah, that's it. So hopefully this helped a few of you out. And if you have any questions, just leave them below and I'll try my best to help you. Thanks for watching.